Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. We have two key interviews for you today. Lexington Mayor Linda Gorton will join us shortly following last week's State of the City-County address and all the wintry weather. But first, Education Commissioner Dr. Robby Fletcher is here. Fletcher has been on the job since the summer, but it's the winter that has brought big challenges for him as well. Some school districts have run out of non-traditional instructional days. They say they need more. It's up to the legislature, but many lawmakers put a premium on in-person learning, and it may not be an easy sell. And Commissioner Fletcher recently raised some concerns about a possible shortfall in SEEK money for local school districts around the state. KDE recently started a roadshow to talk about funding and to get input about schools and some of the new models going on in our schools. Commissioner Fletcher, thanks for coming. We always appreciate seeing you.
It's good to be here.
Well, let's start with these funding concerns. The SEEK formula certainly is not easy to understand. We know it relies on local efforts. It provides a large part of the funding, though, for our local schools from the state, right?
Absolutely. The SEEK formula is very intricate. It depends on a lot of different factors, and it should, because we have such diverse needs across the Commonwealth. So you have everything from property value, what's the property values and local efforts, from a local perspective, and how much money is coming from a local, like for example, if a district has a high property value assessment, then there's more local effort. That's part of the formula. There's also AADA, what's our attendance rates, and our attendance rates are going up, which is a good problem to have, but it's also, that's how the funding it works. But also too, there's a lot of add-ins when you look at everything from transportation, and some of our districts have a large number of buses on the road each and every day. But you also have add-ins for special education, whether it be a low, medium, or high need student. There's different factors that's added in. At-risk students, ELL population, and that's one of the big things we've seen recently is an explosion in that ELL population, which also goes into the SEEK calculation.
So in some ways, good news, better attendance, higher property values and so forth has led to this challenge, right?
Well, if you look at the property value, kind of has an inverse effect, if you will, because the budgeting process is really a modeling system. There is first of all, the basis of SEEK is really set by your General Assembly. For example, how much money is per pupil? The General Assembly sets that. But also too, the General Assembly can set, can there be different factors? For example, Tier 1 talks about transportation and the discrepancy between a high property value district versus a low property value district. So when they set those kind of factors, but also too, there's a consensus process between the Office of the State Budget Director and KDE to give them the numbers that fill in to that formula.
So you took a look at that and you have some concerns.
Yes, at this point, and we still have some numbers rolling in. Right now we're anticipating at least a $12 million shortfall, and that's out of what we're statutorily required to provide districts. It'll probably be a little bit more because of transportation and Tier 1 calculations, maybe on the neighborhood, somewhere around maybe a couple million more than that, but again, somewhere between, I'd say, 12 and 15 million. And that's all based on those different calculations. For example, there was an increase, a model that gave us an increase in the ELL population. But according to our numbers, the ELL population is across our Commonwealth we underestimated by almost 8,000 students. So when you underestimate, that means that it's going to take more money from the state to help with that ELL population.
ELL is?
English language learner.
Gotcha.
English language learner, thank you. But now also too, when you talk about local effort, a part of the SEEK formula is based on the assessments of property. We've projected, and I'm talking about we in this consensus process, the continuing increase in property value. Well, for the third year in this biennium, it was overestimated. So it came in a little bit lower than what was estimated, which means there's going to be less local effort, which means that the state has to pick up that gap, if you will.
You know, this all came as a group of students has sued the state, saying Kentucky is not adequately funding schools. Do they have a good point?
I think if you look at the argument, for example, over the past 3 years, you have a surplus because of the budgeting process. Last year, there was a $153 million surplus. The year before, $46 million surplus. And the year before, approximately $46 million. So well over $200 million, close to $250 million surplus in the last 3 years. And that's because of the formula. So now the Kentucky Student Voice team has other issues that they're talking about as far as, is there enough money put into the base?
Well, let me ask you this. Should the funding mechanism be at least examined? Districts in these lower property value areas obviously have the difficulty at the local level. They often find it impossible, and we've seen evidence of that recently, to pass these nickel taxes where they can do projects and improvements to their schools. Does that all need to be looked at?
I really believe so. And one of the things that we're doing with our Superintendent Advisory Council, we started this work just here recently, probably in November, let's look at how we're funding districts when it comes to facilities. So many districts are unable to pass the nickel tax, or there's so many districts that they don't have high property value, so it may take 2 or 3 nickels, if you will, in order to build a brand new school, whereas maybe in another district that has higher property value, it wouldn't take as much. Still yet, we're not talking about as many nickels, if you will. So what I've asked, and what we've talked with our chair of the Superintendent Advisory Council is Carrie Ballinger, who is at Rockcastle County, and then also too with our Office of Finance and Operations, let's look at what we're doing now when it comes to district facilities. And whatever we're doing now with district facilities, let's look at what's going on throughout the United States. And how do we modernize that process for district facilities? There's been task force in the past, and we want to review those recommendations also too. So with that being said, we really feel like there needs to be a modernization, and we want to include legislators in that conversation to say maybe in 2 or 3 years we have a recommendation to say how do we move forward to modernize, not only modernize but equalize that process for district facilities.
Commissioner, it's been a tough winter. We had that horrid ice storm and snowstorm, and then the intense cold, and now even as we're taping this on Friday, some of your districts had to be got for flash flooding issues. So many schools have exhausted their NTI days. They need and want more. Do you see that happening?
I think it's a possibility, and we've had several contacts with legislators, and some of those legislators have initiated contact with us to talk about how to move forward. There's mixed emotions about NTI, and for example, as a district that utilized NTI, we had the philosophy of we wanted to continue learning. In other words, we wouldn't try to have 2 or 3 days of NTI. If we looked at it and we were going to be out for 5 days, maybe day 2 and day 4 would be NTI, just so we, first of all, continued learning, but stayed in contact with our students. But I do have some numbers here. We have 140 districts that have been participating in NTI. So far, until today, this was yesterday's numbers, 762 days have been utilized, with 21 districts have used all their NTI days. And then we also have 10 districts that have used 9 and 14 districts that have used 8 of their NTI days moving forward. So if you look at that, we have several districts that are right at the end of their NTI.
So there's no room for more flooding
No.
or flu or another snowstorm.
And if I may add, if you'll recall, remember the incident that happened in Laurel County with the shooting on I-75. Some districts used NTI in that case. But also, too, we had the hurricane situation with the high winds. We've also had so many districts that had threats of school violence, and they've used NTI days for that. So it's been not only an odd weather year, but also other needs, too.
It'll be up to the legislature, and as you know, they harken back to the situation of the COVID pandemic, and many of them are very interested in seeing the kids in the schools, not NTI. So do you think it may be a hard sell?
I think there will be some cases it may be, because even if you talk to every district across the state, we believe that in-person learning is best. But we understand that virtual settings have their place. In this case, when you're missing a lot of days, for me it's not about saving days at the end. It's more about continuing learning now. If you're out for example, we talked about a district earlier that in several of our districts have only been in school maybe 4 days. So they were able to continue learning with NTI. It wasn't much about saving days as it is continuing learning. Now at this point, if you look at towards the end of the year, you get into June. And how effective is learning in June? But again, you weigh that out with that virtual versus the in-person in June at the end of the year.
The KDA this week provided some guidance about how schools can respond in immigration issues and situations. You at least wanted the schools to know how they should proceed, right?
Yes, we did. And we put out, essentially we talked about how to handle documents, and there's a guidance on our website. But also too, we talked about, we want to minimize disruption if this happens. So everything from making sure we meet the officer at the front desk if that happens, making sure they have the proper credentials. Then also too, if there's any documentation, make sure that we have that documentation that they have with them. But also too, making sure that we talk with with your local board attorney to make sure everything's in order. But also too, we want to minimize disruption, so we would ask that our school officials will go back and get students if we ever get to that point. To my knowledge, we haven't yet. So again, trying to minimize that what's going on within, so it's not a huge disruption. Because let's be honest, how much of a trauma would that be, not only to that child, but also too to everyone that saw that, if you saw police officers coming in and pull them out. So we want to try to make this, if it happens, as discreet as possible. Personally, we hope that if there's any issues, that's with adults and it happens outside of our school walls.
Would you like to be notified ahead of time?
I think that it's more important that your superintendent and your local authorities be notified ahead of time, and then afterwards we would be. But it's more important to have that local notification first.
The legislature may get into some DEI legislation in a way that impacts K through 12. The Majority Leader Wise told me here recently that it will likely have less to do with curriculum and more with how contracts or bids are advertised or awarded. Will you be monitoring that?
Absolutely. Well, whatever comes from the state legislature when it comes to funding, we will also always monitor that. But when it comes to those type of initiatives, we are all about opportunity and access. Regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of gender, of anything of that matter, we're here to love kids. And we want to make sure that every single child has opportunity and access to a high quality education. And that's what we should be more about education. And I think that our districts do a good job of that.
Any other areas you'll be watching the legislature hoping they do or don't do?
Well, of course, we hope that they add into the seat calculation. This is not a budget year, so we're hoping in years to come there will be more of that base funding in hopes of increasing teacher pay and all educator pay. The other thing that we're monitoring, we're talking to some legislators, and they've been very open about our new accountability system. And we hope to have something proposed in 2026. And of course, the last one I think is a good bill overall, and that's the red tape reduction bill, if you will. And what they're talking about is how do we minimize some of the requirements that teachers, it may be in excess, so that we can take some load off. The one area that we're talking about with our legislators is the consolidated school improvement process. That's a part of that red tape reduction bill. So that's another area we're looking at.
I know you've been on the road. You have had some forums, and you have some more to come, right? People
Absolutely.
Have an opportunity to come and learn about the schools.
We've had six open town halls that relates to the new accountability model and where we are now and getting input. But we've also done Seek roadshows. We're trying to inform our public about what exactly is available there.
We appreciate you coming, Commissioner.
Good to be
Thank you very
here.
much. Stay with us. We're coming right back on Kentucky Newsmakers with Lexington Mayor Linda Gorton. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Lexington Mayor Linda Gorton is joining us now. This last week, the mayor delivered her State of the City-County address and talked about where things stand in America's 59th largest city. Among the highlights, public safety. Homicides are down, and so are shootings among those 10 to 29 years old. Voters in Lexington approved a park tax that will generate about $8 million a year for parks. Lexington is also spending the year celebrating its 250th birthday. And the year started with that ice and snow and bitterly cold temperatures that prompted the mayor to reassess the city's capacity to deal with tough winter weather. Mayor Gorton, welcome. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. Always happy to be here.
Thank you. Let's talk about the state of the city-county. And you really wanted to highlight public safety, which you've always said is the most important thing city government does. Something appears to be working in the area of violent crime, homicides and shootings down.
Well, we have been persistent, and I believe that any city that's not a safe city can't be good at most things. So first you have to be a safe city, so we've allocated resources. We have police working with One Lexington, working with nonprofits. It's an all-out effort. And our One Lexington folks work with that demographic that's age 10 to 29. The homicides are down in that area. The shootings are down significantly. And that's what we're going for. And people here want us to have a safe city. We are using more technology. It's kind of what I call a police force multiplier. And the license plate readers and the real-time intelligence center. And we've had really good success with getting more guns off the street, finding missing persons. I think we found 27 missing persons just through the license plate readers. And we're solving crimes. So this is what people want. They tell me all the time, and our public is really supportive of our police.
How important is that community engagement piece in all of this? Divine Karama has said everybody has a role to play in this.
And that's true, Bill. Everyone has a role to play. And the community input, the community participation is crucial to us being able to keep lowering those statistics on homicides, on shootings, etc. So our public's really stepping up. People are really helping.
You have some information about the Lexington economy that has come in this week that you're very encouraged about.
Yes, I am so excited about this. We learned that the latest economic development look at how cities are doing has come out, and we are in the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank District. It's a region, and our economy is the #1 best growing economic situation. That is jobs, it's revenue from our businesses. We're growing at 5.5% rate. That's higher than Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Our economy is really on fire here. And that's important to us because that is revenue and business that works to help us, the government, give services to people. It's a big deal.
Well, as you were preparing your State of the City County address, what else stood out to you? I know you did make mention of the money for parks that, that voters approved.
Yes. The referendum that passed by 61% of the voters will go into effect and be collected in November's tax bills. So we will start seeing some of that capital improvement money come in for next year. And that was quite a large number of people to support that referendum. The approximately $8 million of capital money that will come in will be strictly for parks improvements, building things in parks. It's not for programming, it's not for people, people's salaries. It's for the capital improvements, and it will really help our parks in a big way.
The annual homeless count was done this week. We don't know the results and won't for some time, but Lexington has a challenge. You're well aware of that. Do you feel the city is adequately addressing homelessness and housing affordability, as a whole?
Well, those are two interesting things. We try to tackle homelessness every single day. And I went out on that count that you mentioned, where we count our homeless folks. I was on a team of 4. And we have done a good job over the years, but it's an issue where people don't have to go into housing. They're not required to. They can say no. And so it's hard when we can't get them into housing to help them in other ways. With the affordable housing, we just opened yesterday a new senior living with 38 units for seniors at the Woodland Christian Church. They used part of their property. And we are really making good inroads into our affordable housing. Last year, we opened about 557 or 77 additional units, 577 additional units. For every dollar that we, the city, put into affordable housing, we leverage $9 in private partners, banks, Kentucky Housing Corporation, others who help us fund these units. So we're working really hard on this, and we're having good success. We just can't quit.
It was a rough start to the year, Mayor, as you know, with the ice and the snowstorm, and then the days and days of bitter cold, so nothing melted. The schools couldn't open. People were trapped in their neighborhoods, and I know you heard a lot about the frustrations. But you have initiated some changes. Did there come a point where, it became so frustrating to you that you knew something had to give?
Well, this was a difficult storm. We hadn't had a storm like this with snow and ice. Our folks looked back, it was in the 90s. And so ice really immobilizes every city. However, we know we can always do better. And so we immediately sat down internally and decided on a few things we could do now. We bought some new spreaders for the salt. We bought some new plows that we can put on our smaller trucks that we own. We have done a few things like that. We've ordered 3 big trucks for next year. They'll take 8 months to come in or so.
Can you cross-train some more personnel so they're available? The frustrations were in the neighborhood, so the main roads were cleared pretty quickly.
The main roads were great, and then we got the ice. And you see, when we get ice or more snow, then we got more snow, Bill. We had 7 inches of snow, almost an inch of ice, 3 more inches of snow. They have to go back to the main roads because we have to get our hospitals accessible and our medical care, and then we go to our priority streets. It is frustrating, and that kind of a storm is especially frustrating. We couldn't just keep going in the neighborhoods. We had to go back to the bigger roads that carry the most people in the automobiles. And there were a lot of issues. We've had an opportunity this past week, to sit down with Dr. Liggins, the superintendent of public schools, and his team, and myself and my team, and we had a great after-action discussion. We evaluated what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better. We've got a lot of areas where we're going to do more joint communication, because in the past we didn't really jointly communicate. We did our own communications, and I'm really excited about that.
You're convinced it'll be better?
It will be better. Now, if we have ice, the ice will not be better. We can't, if anybody like my husband chopped the ice on their sidewalk, they know it's hard to get off. And our plows are not built to scoop ice, they scoop snow. But we will do a much better job, I think, with joint communications. And we're all really excited about that. We've talked about the roads and priorities, and we're going to look at that together. There was a lot of discussion after the fact about the softwares not being able to talk to each other, the school systems and ours. And we've done some work and some brainstorming on GPS and being able to be more together on that. So I'm very hopeful that all these changes will make a difference. Now, I'm praying we don't get ice, because ice does shut us down.
As Lexington celebrates its 250th anniversary or birthday this year, there are lots of events planned. Basketball week is wrapping up. How much of an opportunity is the celebration of this birthday to showcase really what makes Lexington special?
I think it's a huge opportunity. I don't know if you know this, but for the 200th anniversary, they had a weekend celebration. This celebration for our 250th is from January 5th, well, really it was New Year's Eve, through the 31st of December this year. And there are many, many, many activities. Most of them are free and open to the public. And it's all kinds of things. We have history. We have, this month, January, was health and wellness. We have literary, we have culinary, we have music, we have Come Home Week in June. It's so many exciting things, and it will give people an opportunity to pick and choose what they want to do. And it gives us an opportunity to highlight kind of, our history and the things that have made us really a great place over these 250 years. In terms of our history, we will look back at some of the things that were not so great, like slavery. And we will celebrate a lot of the good things going on, and then we're going to go boldly into the future. And that's the next 250 years.
Real quickly, and we have less than a minute, do you anticipate that the Lexington Police Department will be involved in any of the immigration measures that the Trump administration has planned, or has that been discussed?
We don't anticipate really much of anything there, because they've said they're going after hardened criminals. If we are asked to cooperate, we will cooperate. We already have an ICE desk in our jail, so that people who are arrested are vetted by ICE. So this is something that's been operating for a long time now, but we don't expect much of anything here.
We appreciate you coming by, Mayor.
Yeah,
thank you very much. I understand you have a busy weekend planned as well. All right. Stay with us now. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment. And before we go, a reminder that the Kentucky legislative session will resume on Tuesday, the 2025 session. And one of our scheduled guests on next weekend's edition of Kentucky Newsmakers is Kentucky U.S. Senator Rand Paul. That's Kentucky Newsmakers for this week. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.